Welcome back to the program. Now, Bolson joins me again in the studio. We're taking a look at some of the pre-MPC reports that have come in from the economic unit of Access Bank, for instance, and from the BGO group. Most of from the analysis, it looks as if all analysts are actually expecting that the central bank, the Monetary Policy Committee, will actually take a hold stance. Bolson, in between the last MPC meeting and now, there have been mixed feelings in terms of gauging performance against expectations. We've had a slew of reports that have come in, and for instance, the National Bureau of Statistics released the February headline inflation. We saw it increased by 0.2 percentage points to 8.4%. Kind of what investors, analysts, I beg your pardon, were actually expecting. But would that impact so much on the decisions that the MPC will take at the end of its meeting tomorrow?
I think one of the key things that the Godwin Emefiele and the rest of his team would be considering is the likelihood or indication that the U.S. Fed, Janet Yellen, has given that there will be a rate hike in the U.S. by June. After this meeting tomorrow, the next MPC will be sometime in, I think, the 3rd or the 4th week of May, and that will be just before June. So every central bank in the world eyes the U.S. Fed, as it were. You look at how the U.S. Fed is, in what direction the U.S. Fed moving. For Emefiele and the rest and the other 11 members of the MPC, they would also be looking at the European Central Bank, because we have Eurobonds out there in very big volumes. So that will be very key, not just for the Nigerian for our own sovereign bonds, but also for other corporate bonds that are tied to the euro, as it were. We have a number of financing for Nigerian lenders that are from the IFC and from the European market. So the Fed and the ECB are very crucial for Nigeria to look at what their interest rate decision will be, to look at quantitative easing in the euro, what's happening to the euro currency, and what have you. So these are the basket of issues that Emefiele and the rest will be considering. Again, they'll be looking at what is happening to other African countries within the region, and outside they'll be considering what is going on with South Africa. It wasn't good news that ESCOM got a rate cut last week because of the energy crisis in South Africa. That's Africa's most developed economy to date. That is also should be a cause of concern for Nigeria because of trade relations between these two countries. You can't afford to have two biggest economies in Africa going into a tailspin, suffering significant headwinds, as it were. Both countries are in that headwinds. If you look at if you remember what the World Economics data pushed out last week as far as the sales managers index was concerned, Nigeria and South Africa are suffering headwinds, whereas Egypt is taking in more of tailwind and is moving forward. That will be a serious concern, not with Ghana, our next the largest economy, also going into some very serious headwinds. So if you have Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana going into significant headwinds, economically speaking, at this period in time, it's a very serious concern for Nigeria and our economic managers. Unfortunately, we are in election period, and some of these things will not be significantly addressed until after the elections. So if you look at MPC meeting tomorrow, the central bank would also be considering what happens to the budget. And despite those announcements and those agreements between the executive and the legislature as to $53 a barrel as the benchmark, how the capital and the recurrent expenditure part of the book will be balanced moving forward will be a serious concern for the central bank. Whatever decision is taken tomorrow will have to pace into May 29 and most likely beyond. So once this meeting is over, the central bank governor and the rest of his team will be sitting on their TV, keeping their ears to the ground, who wins the election on Saturday, and that will give them an idea of what the calculus will be for the next MPC meeting. The key issue will be, if you have a continuation of the present administration, I'm sure Emefiele will have a bit of extra hours of sleep. That will be from March 29 or 30 as soon as the numbers are in. If it's the new administration, if the main contender, retired General Muhammad Buhari, wins the presidential polls, I'm sure Emefiele would lose some hours of sleep. And I'm saying that here because he will have to think of an administration that has never been in government before coming in. So he will have more wake-up nights to think through how it's going to manage a new administration on his hands and what will be the fiscal and policy announcements and actions from the new administration, the completely brand new administration, will be for him from May 29th. So either ways, Emefiele is not in a very enviable position as to speak right now. So either ways, whichever way it goes, even if the present administration continues for another 4 years, you will still have to know that it will no longer be business as usual between the elections and May 29 and moving forward. That we expect some cabinet reshuffling. We expect a number of change in administration to take place. This administration would have to know that this next 4 years is a ticket that has to be performed upon and perhaps much better than it had been before. Okay, so therefore, the job of Emefiele between this MPC meeting and the one for May 29 will not be as easy as it had been for the former central bank chief. Another thing I'm sure they're going to be considering, another major consideration for them at this meeting is going to be the exchange rate market as it affects the foreign reserves and its impact, of course, on the macroeconomic stability. The central bank has had to close that RDAS window to ensure that we have uniform interest rates. And you mentioned it already at the beginning of the program. We've seen the Naira continue to hover and trade around that new band that the central bank has put of 197 and $199 to the 199 Naira to the dollar. But looking at still this exchange rate volatility, are you thinking what most people are actually thinking on the streets, that we're going to see maybe a possible further shift again in the corridor for the benchmark? I'm on the street. I don't know what you're asking if other people are on the street. I'm on the street. I'm man on the street. I'm your citizen Joe. I'm next door to you. The point is, we're all in the same boat. Everybody's looking at the Naira, and you'll be surprised that even staffers within these organizations are also worried about the Naira. I'm surprised. People come from other departments and say, hey, Bosun, I say I'm not a central bank chief, but they want to know why is the dollar Naira heading. Every Nigerian is concerned, whether they have Naira in their pocket or they have dollars in accounts. It doesn't matter. People are worried about what happens to the Naira. And I think that is one constant factor around political leadership changes in Nigeria since 1979. Each time you have a military coup, Naira is always affected. There's always petrol scarcity. Each time you have a change, the Naira is always the whipping boy. And we need to find a solution to this moving forward, such that transition elections don't dislocate the markets, currency, bonds, treasury bills, interbank, whatever, you call it, equities as it were. We just need to find a way around it, such that all the time we don't keep suffering every 4 years or every 8 years. And I think it's unfair on the part of the political class to whip us in the markets each time they're going for elections and they're seeking elective positions. But whether that will come, I'm sure that having done a major front door devaluation of the Naira in November 25th to be precise, the central bank would now use administrative, or will continue using administrative processes to manage the behavior of the Naira and the relationship between the Naira and the dollar and the rest of the currencies in the basket, such that there will not be any need for the central bank to do another front-end devaluation. Using administrative processes to manage the currency is done everywhere in the world, and there's nothing new about that. And folks shouldn't get unduly worried about what the central bank is doing, closing the RDS window, trying to rein in banks, closing some of the gaps in which they have in terms of what's your net open position as far as our forex window is concerned in your vault, or what is being central bank is doing with the domiciliary accounts as far as those who export goods out of the country. It's all about bring all the money in, make sure we account for everything. We need all the Nairas and the kitty. That will continue to happen. And that is the job of the central bank. The central bank is the bank of the last resort. It's also the bank of the first resort anyway, because this is put a signature on your currency that we all spend. So from both end and front end, you need, the central bank will keep that in place. We don't need to panic. This is part of the measures that need to be sure that everything works well, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out well, we are going to suffer for it. So you're also taking that position that the central bank or the Monetary Policy Committee will hold their position on all rates, including, for instance, the foreign exchange rates as well. I have this feeling that perhaps Emefiele might do something to impress the markets. Perhaps not the headline interest rate, perhaps something down the line. All right.
Bosin, thank you so
But
much.
you don't hold me to it. No,
yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you in the studio, but I'll hold you to it, and maybe I'll hold you to the extent that I'll get your cup of coffee if you lose out on it. But thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio, Bosin.
Thank you, Harriet.
Bosin Mofai, of course, is at Bosin Business. You can follow him if you want to, keep up with updates on what's happening in the world of business, or follow me at Harriet Agbeyi. Also, we have at Channels TV and at Biz Morning. Join the conversations on any of those platforms. But that's the program for today. Many thanks for being a part of it. Of course, as you know, the biggest issue right now is the MPC meeting. Let's get your thoughts on it and your perspective as well. I'm Harriet Agbeyi. If you missed out on any of today's episodes, or if you missed out on today's episode, I beg your pardon, log on to youtube.com/channelsweb/videos. Bye-bye.